Thank you for joining us again, and now it's my great pleasure to welcome back Fiona Dunbar. Fiona gave a very inspiring talk last year called Take 5, and this year she's going to be talking to us about helping our teens and adults to communicate effectively, comfortably and confidently. Fiona has a wealth of experience as a manager, as a teacher trainer, as a teacher. She is the Director of ELI School in Málaga, and she's here today to inspire us to help our teens and adults to communicate comfortably and confidently. Welcome back, Fiona.
Thanks, Louise. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me again. Okay, so good morning, everybody. As Louise mentioned, this morning we're going to be talking about how we can help our students, our teen and adult students, to become more communicative, more competent and more comfortable, which I think we agree are things that we would be looking for in all of our classes. So we're going to start off with a quote from Bill Gates, which is, "Any tool that enhances communication has profound effects in terms of how people can learn from each other and how they can achieve the kind of freedoms that they're interested in." Now, of course, I think in all of our classes, we would expect that our students would want to enhance their communication, we want to promote learning, and if we can achieve freedom, well, what a great thing to try and do. So, first of all, we're going to start off with a poll this morning.
Okay.
To see what your situation is. The question is, my students feel frustrated by their inability to express themselves effectively. When they get stuck, they stop. And there are a selection of answers there.
Mm-hmm.
So
we've got always, often, sometimes, never, not sure, or rarely as well.
Yep.
So please choose the option that you think is most appropriate. We'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. Feeling frustrated, yes, I think if I think back to my classes, teens and adults, teens in particular, I think it was often, though they didn't always express it.
Yeah.
It was more through recitals and not participating, and I got that feeling that, yes.
Yeah. For me, I think it's one of the big differences also between young learners and teens and adults, that those of us who teach different ages, I think for me, you really do notice the frustration that adults and teens feel, which maybe young learners, it's less common.
Yes, and people are saying sometimes and often in particular, and a lower percentage, about 11%, always and rarely. So obviously we've got people out there who are different, or working in different contexts, different groups, different makeup of groups, different learning contexts, so there will be a variety of responses.
Of course. And I think we have to remember also that no two students are the same. So even within one classroom, you're going to have different problems and different strengths and so on.
Great.
So there are a few people out there. Did anybody put never?
Never, no, nobody put never. Not sure, 4%. So really, I mean, the majority are saying sometimes or often.
Okay, so I think that's a good start. We all have some students that sometimes we want to help with these problems. So what can we do to help them then? For a student to become proficient in a language, they need a combination of accuracy and fluency. And one of the things I think is that, particularly with lower levels, although throughout all the levels, we tend to kind of work on one or work on the other, and often in fact these things work against one another. So you'll find that if you have a lot of focus on accuracy in an activity, that the fluency tends to drop down or to disappear, or vice versa. So we really want to look at how we can look at these things together, and for that we're looking at communicative competence. Now, there are a number of different definitions of communicative competence. Generally speaking, we're looking at 4 areas, which could be fairly simply referred to, I think, by appropriacy, cohesion and coherence, the way that you organise your discourse, communication strategies which we use to help aid what we want to say, aid the understanding, and of course the words and rules of the language that we're using, which inevitably we need to know about. So we're going to look at some things today that can help us to improve these different areas with our students and help us to practice them. So what do you think we could do, Louise?
Oh.
Any ideas?
Which one to choose first?
Any.
Cohesion and coherence. Cohesion and coherence is
You don't know?
interesting.
It's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. It's okay to not know.
No,
I've put you on the spot here.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I'm doing a lead into my next activity.
Okay.
Okay. So, when our students are starting off, particularly with lower levels,
Right.
they tend often in the classroom to say, I don't know. Now, of course, Louise, I'm sure you know the answer to all those questions.
Well, no, not necessarily, yeah?
Yeah?
I would need a little bit of time
tricky.
to think about it.
Exactly. So, we've got another question here, which is, can you think of another way to say, I don't know, using any of the expressions below?
Okay, so again, this is a question to you. It'll appear on your screen now. Just send in some short answers. We don't need to write long sentences. Can you think of another way to say, I don't know, using one of our words on the slide? Okay. Yeah, one is, I like the one with clue. Let's see what...
Yeah.
I will try and stop myself from giving the answers.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
I'll try. It's hard.
Okay. Let's give a minute or two to
Yes.
see if
Yes.
those who are watching can
Because the
come up with
opposite
some.
of that, I know,
Yeah.
when you're absolutely sure. I know the answer. Definitely.
Yeah.
And now people are coming in with no idea.
Uh-huh.
I haven't a clue. That was the one I wanted
Yeah.
to say. No idea, no clue. I've no idea, haven't got a clue. Who knows? As a question form.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I love this one. I haven't got the faintest idea. I haven't got the foggiest. Isn't there expression?
There's another option.
There's
I haven't
another
got the
option.
foggiest. Yeah.
I haven't got
Yeah.
the foggiest. And is there anyone that's different? I just want to make sure. No, everybody's saying I haven't.
Okay,
similar
great.
ones.
So
thank you.
Here we've got some suggestions. Now, one of the reasons you might want to use this with your lower level students is to expand their ideas. And in fact, this is an idea which I've adapted from a Macmillan life skills lesson plan, which I found on the internet, which was available. And there's some great materials on there. So I've adapted it to talk about it today. But one of the things we might want to do with lower levels is to expand their options of different ways of saying things. There are a number of reasons why we do this. One reason is because it would they can gain confidence by having different options, and it's also been proven that particularly when speaking to native speakers, now we know that a lot of communication happens between non-native speakers, but in general, and particularly with native speakers, if the speaker of the second language can use a variety of language, they're more likely to hold the interest of the learner, of the listener, sorry, and to motivate the listener to help them to communicate, which of course communication is a two-way thing, and we need everybody to be involved in that. So if we can motivate not only our learners but also those who they're speaking to, then that's got to be a good
you need
thing.
Feedback, don't you, to
Absolutely.
keep going. You need reactions.
Exactly, exactly. So that was a little activity about how you might want to use different language. Everybody sometimes has to say, I don't know, and so why not give them some other options to do that?
I can well imagine teenagers liking to use dunno, search me.
Exactly.
How should I know?
How should I know?
You say.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so we've got another question. We're keeping everybody busy here.
Exactly.
What conversation filler do you most often use when speaking or listening? I'm not sure if I've been doing it yet, but I know that I often use so.
Yes, I do as well.
So, right.
Basically is one that I think I abuse probably.
Yeah.
I'm not using it at the moment, but when I'm in conversation with people in a informal context, to emphasize a point. Beatrice, Thank you, Beatrice. It's a tricky question. Let me think. Yeah.
Let me think. Good one. Good one. Yeah.
And also, I think. Oh, hang on. So I mean, yes, I mean, when you're explaining something, and you really want to get to the point, and you want the listener to really understand what it is. I mean, this is what I really mean. Of course, hesitators, fillers like well.
Absolutely.
Sure, another person, Suzanne. I say sure when I am listening. Yes, sure.
Yeah.
Right. I see what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah, so there are many. I mean, the list is endless, isn't it?
And here we have a fairly long list. It's not endless by any means, but we do have a list of some that we've been using. As Suzanne pointed out, not only while speaking, but also while listening.
Yes.
It's important to keep that conversation going.
Exactly.
And again, for our learners, if we can keep the conversation going, then it's something that it will help them then to give them some time to formulate what they want to say and how they're going to say it. And also when they're listening, to keep them involved in the conversation. I know when I first learnt Spanish, I spent a lot of time missing out on my chance to join in a conversation because it took me so long to formulate what I wanted to say that the conversation had moved on. They were talking about something else, and I think we can all relate to that if we've learnt another language, that it can be tricky to keep yourself involved. So that's some conversation fillers that we might look at. Now, in terms of activities in the classroom, this is one which I've used for years and years, and I don't know if you recognise the photo there, if you know which area of London it could be. It's a famous film.
Notting Hill.
Absolutely, yep. Notting
when
Hill.
You said the famous film, of course I did.
It's an old film now, but it's it's one of my favourites.
I know the area. I used to live, well, not live there, I worked in that area, in Notting Hill Gate.
Right.
Yes, back in the early 90s.
Okay. Were you there when Hugh Grant was there?
I never met him, no.
Okay. Well, there's a
Didn't
famous
move in
scene.
those circles, eh?
There's a famous scene in the film, for those of who you know the film, in the bookshop, where Hugh Grant is working in the bookshop, and the lady comes in and he's interested in speaking to her, and the conversation is a great example using loads of conversation fillers. Now, it's just one example. It's a short scene from the film. It's 2 or 3 minutes long, but I've often used it with my students just to raise awareness of how in an authentic context those conversation fillers really can be used to keep the conversation going. I'm sure there are more modern films also.
If you look at the transcript of these conversations, you'll probably see that they occupy quite a space.
Absolutely. Yep. The percentage of dialogue
that is conversation fillers or discourse markers is quite high.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, a kind of authentic thing that can draw our students' attention to this, give them an example, and let them see that it's not just something used by learners of a language, but this is something which actually happens in real life. So that's one activity that I've done sometimes with my classes. As I say, I'm sure there are more modern films that people can use. Most films have some kind of dialogue like this that it's easy to find an appropriate part. Absolutely. Now, some other activities which we could do, one of them would be to categorise the different conversation fillers.
Yes.
So we looked before, we could have some which we use while we're thinking of what we want to say, some we use to respond, for interruption, etc. So we can give our students maybe a selection, maybe not as many as I had on my slide before, all at once, but a selection of a few to start, and they categorise them into the different areas of discourse and where they might use them. Bingo, one of my favourite activities for everything, where the students have a few conversation fillers that they have to use during the conversation in a practice activity, or in fact during the lesson. It could be over the course of the lesson, and when they use one they cross it off, and of course when they cross them all off they say
bingo.
Absolutely. An anchor poster, that's when you have a poster on the wall with some language that directs your students' attention to what language they might use. So up on your classroom wall, if you're able to decorate your classroom, you can have a few fillers that then they're always there for the students to look at and to think about and try to use.
Exactly.
It helps to reinforce across the different lessons. Just a Minute is a famous BBC programme.
Oh, yes.
Many of us know the programme. I think it's still going.
Is it?
I think it is. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think so. But it's the basic premise is that you have to speak for a minute without stopping, without repeating yourself, and without being interrupted on a topic. And again, it's something that I often play in class, where students have to speak for a minute on the topic. They're in a group of 2 or 3, and the others, if there is some hesitation, if there is an opportunity, the others have a chance to jump in and finish the minute. And again, this is something where if we've got some conversation fillers, it's easier for us to keep going without repeating constantly the same language.
Yes.
And of course, role plays, where maybe if we've looked at a dialogue from a film or some kind of sample dialogue, then the students play those out either as themselves or in a different character. Absolutely. So just a few ideas to practice there. Now, what we've been speaking about so far is the conversation fillers, where you're killing time while you think about how best to say something. But sometimes we don't actually know how to say what we want. That's another problem in our own language and of course in a second language. So we've got some different possibilities here. Some activities that we might do. This is one which I found about in from somebody called Kathy Bailey, who's a linguist, and I think it was a webinar that I watched or a TED talk of hers, and it's called Corner Shop. Now the idea is that the students have different groups, so we would be 2 groups, for example, Louise here, and we have a selection of objects which we can describe, but the students maybe don't know the name of the object in the second language. Now these things here, we've got some tweezers, an Allen key, a pawn, some steel wool, some bulldog clips, some safety pins and some adapters. It's just an example of things that we don't always know the exact word for something, and it's the kind of thing that maybe when you're travelling you need to go and buy these things.
I was just thinking that. And you go to a shop and you don't know what the word is. And you're looking around and you're hoping that your eyes will light on it and you won't have to say anything. Just point. But it often isn't the case.
It's not always the case. So the idea is that in our classes we have the students in 2 groups, and one person wants to go and buy one of these things, the others are the shopkeepers. And we have to negotiate the meaning by explaining what it is we're looking for, and the other person has to find it and give it over. Now, of course, if you have the actual material, you can do that in your class, which is great. But if not, there are always flashcards, there are always pictures of different things, and I think it's a great activity, partly because it does practice that real life situation that students can find themselves in when they do travel, but also the whole concept of explaining something and negotiating meaning, checking understanding, are great tools to help improve our communication strategies. The students might even have to use some compensation strategies like miming, gesture, and that's fine. That's great. That's real life communication, and it is what we do when we're trying to explain.
We're negotiating the meaning and
absolutely. And again, for adults, for teenagers, for them to feel comfortable in that situation, to feel that it's okay sometimes to mime, to make a gesture, to explain what you want and not know the exact word, that's a great tool for our students to go away with.
And it's a really, it's a clear life skill.
Absolutely.
That
Absolutely.
you need also in your own language.
Of course, of course.
No?
Yep, yep. We can't always remember the exact word for bulldog clip, for example.
Or specialist vocabulary.
Absolutely.
I mean, if I go and, I don't know, go to a appliance store or something like that, or I don't know, the ironmongers, and I'm looking for some specific tool.
Exactly.
And, you know, I just haven't had time to look it up.
Yeah.
And I can't find it in the shop, so I have to somehow explain to the shop assistant what it is I'm looking. I have to describe it.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, no, of
approximate
course. Absolutely.
As much as possible.
And I think we feel comfortable doing that in our own language.
Yes.
But then when you're in the situation of it being a second language, sometimes it can feel a bit stressful.
Exactly.
And so we want our students to feel more comfortable.
Yes. Absolutely.
Doing so that
and
it's
give them
fine.
the opportunities to practice.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. Now, a similar activity might be what it could be called Tic Tac Toe or Noughts and Crosses.
Yes.
Where on the board, for example, we have pictures of some activities where maybe the students do know the words or maybe they don't. And they have to come up with a definition of the word in order to get the cross or the knots or crosses for their team. So they might be saying, I want the thing which you use to open the door.
Oh, a key.
Absolutely, yeah. So we can see there on the top right of the grid,
so
that would be a point for my
for
team because
my
I
team.
had given the explanation clearly enough.
And you want to get 3 in a row.
Absolutely,
Yes.
yeah. Okay. Again, you can draw them on the board. You can use flashcards. One thing which I really like, those of us who work in academies and have students of different ages, is to sometimes use the kids' flashcards for the teens and adults.
Okay.
Because we do sometimes forget, not so much just for vocabulary, but for this kind of idea where they're having to explain something.
Yes.
Maybe they know the word for toothbrush, and that's fine,
Yes.
that's good. But if they can explain it, that's another tool that they can use when they don't know the word.
Exactly.
So a bit of practice in definitions and so on can be
less stressful.
Helpful.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Now, do you coffee pot? Do you remember?
Remind me, sorry.
Okay,
But I do coffee a lot.
Yeah, me too, me too. Now, it's a traditional game. It's a guessing game where one person thinks of something, which could be a noun, a verb, an adjective, and the other person or the other team have to guess what it is we're thinking of.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to give you an example, and I know I haven't prepared you for this,
That's
Louise,
okay.
so let's see.
I'll jump in at the deep end.
Now, you have to decide what I'm referring to with the word coffee pot, okay? So I have 2 coffee pots at home. They are very friendly. I feed my coffee pots every morning. And when I go away, for example, when I go to Barcelona, I need to find somebody to help look after my coffee pots. Any ideas?
Can I say are your coffee pots animals?
Yes, they are.
Are your coffee pots cats?
Yes, they are. Excellent. Well done. Well done. So again, it's a game, an activity which could be done in pairs. It can be done in 2 teams, and there can be any language at all. And it's again a situation where you're practicing describing something and trying to guess what somebody else is talking about with this traditional game. I remember playing it years ago when I was a kid.
Yes, and you could have different levels, no sort of, because the example you gave was, it was quite...
Exactly.
And you could maybe make it a little bit more difficult and more, you can adapt.
Of course,
depending on the challenge level that you want to set.
You can use it for high levels to talk about maybe very specific adjectives or adverbs.
Exactly.
And in that way it gives students good practice in really honing into the meaning of those kind of
and
specific...
related to the language that they are working on in the course book and preparing for, and it would be good actually for exam preparation as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's important to remember that all of these things for exams are a really important, useful tool, not only for real life communication, but also in exams, in speaking exams, and in writing exams. Then often the criteria includes communicative strategies. Thankfully, we're not only looking at grammar and vocab. And so students need to feel that these are useful tools for their exams.
Doing an activity to have a bit of fun, but that there's a clear pedagogical purpose behind it. Great.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, one more game here, which again is a party game. And what we do is we have 2 teams. You start off with a hat, and you have to put the names of some famous people into the hat. So we put the famous people in the hat. The first round, we give a definition. So I have 1 minute to take names out of the hat and give definitions of as many people as possible. So again, you're on the spot here, Louise. Okay, this person is a very famous person from Málaga, where I live. He's an actor. He works in Spain and also in Hollywood. Any ideas?
He's Antonio Banderas.
Absolutely. Okay. Now, the next round, we have the same people in the hat, but this time I can only use 1 word. Okay. We're whizzing through. But the idea would be that, again, if I take out Antonio Banderas, this time I would say Málaga. And you would have to try to remember that I was talking about
Antonio Banderas.
Absolutely. And the third round, I mime, so I might do a kind of Mask of Sorrow type movement for you to know that I was talking about Antonio Banderas.
Nice.
So, this one's a party game. We usually do it with famous people, but again, why not do it with target vocabulary, with target language? Because that way you can use it to help give definitions and make those connections with the language that you're working on in your course book or in your classes with your students. Okay? Now, we have another poll. So of the games that we have whizzed through, which one would people like to play with their students? We had the corner shop, where you had to buy the different objects, the noughts and crosses, the coffee pot, the hat, and of course the old favourite bingo.
Okay, so we'll give you a couple of seconds again to answer this question. Of the games you've seen so far today in Fiona's talk, which would you like to use in your classes? Okay, and we'll wait for the answers to come through. And we've got 1, 2, 3. The suspense of it all. Corner shop.
Yay!
Up to 32%. Noughts and... No, do your coffee pot.
Do your coffee pot.
That's
also
what was
popular.
coming through. And noughts and crosses, and keep it under your hat.
Excellent.
Fantastic. Good. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Okay, I hope that people will try those out and find them useful.
Yes.
Okay, so just a couple of other things. What we've looked at so far have mainly been kind of dialogue and conversation. Now, this is something which I found, again, Macmillan Advantage, loads of resources on there for lots of things.
I see you've got Malala.
But I do, I have Malala there. And so this is an activity where they're talking about different issues that might be of interest in challenging women today. So what the idea of the resource is, that the students choose one of the issues and they do a debate on the issue. Okay. Now, of course, debate requires quite a lot of preparation in terms of ideas, in terms of discussion. But I think if you do have the time to do that with your students, it's a great way for them to formulate their ideas. Now, one way that I thought of maybe adapting this a little bit would be to make it into a presentation. So after some initial discussion, the students choose one of the topics and they're going to give a presentation about it. We've got some language here which comes from Gateway, from the 2nd edition, which we use in our school for a kind of B2 level, where the students use the language to organise their ideas, to give a presentation about the topic. Now, obviously, there are some controversial topics.
Yes.
I hope that equal rights of women is not a controversial topic here today. I don't think so. But I think it's useful for students to have that practice in giving presentations, thinking about what they want to say.
Yes.
Particularly if they're interested in studying or working in a country or in a situation where they're going to use English, even if they don't go to study in the UK. A lot of students do Erasmus, where they might be studying in another country but using English, and some practice and preparation of presentations I think could be really useful. So again, it's about giving them the language to help them with it. The ideas, we need to do some work on ideas, but when we can give them these expressions, it helps them to structure what they want to say.
Very good.
Yeah. Now, just the last couple of things, we're going to be talking about writing, because so far we've been mainly talking about speaking, and of course communication is not only speaking. So I do have a final question here, which is what's the last thing that you asked your students to write?
Okay, so again, you've got a couple of seconds to write in your answers, short answers, and we'll see what I'm sure people are in different contexts, and we'll get a variety of answers. So, Beatrice, thank you very much, Beatrice. A film review was the last thing that she asked her students to write about. Let's see. Posts in, interesting, using social media.
Oh, really? That's a nice idea.
A note to a teacher saying why you missed last class. I presume you mean for teenagers and not adults. And thank you. Somebody said, Sonia, thank you, an essay. And somebody for students had to write B1 Part 3 writing, so they were doing exam writing practice. Another person had people writing in a blog, great.
Okay, lovely.
A formal email, a conversation, a summary of an episode of the series. We are all watching, but I must admit there's so many.
Absolutely,
I wonder which one would you choose? Your favourite place, a Wikipedia post, which is an interesting
lots of variety
one, a
there.
report, a complaint, B1 and B2 writing questions, letters, reviews, etc. So we've got a whole range of ideas and activities here.
Great. Okay. Good. Well, it's good to see that there's lots of variety out there. And so we're just going to look at this quickly for a moment, the idea of process writing. Now, the idea of process writing is basically the teacher comes away from being the marker and puts themselves more in the position of a reader who's helping with the process, the creative process of the writing. Because I think sometimes, particularly with exam writings, etc., there's a tendency that we do some preparation in the class, we look at a model, but the students kind of go away, do the writing, bring it back, we mark it, we give them feedback, of course, but we're sort of saying after the end of the event, we're saying, oh, this was good and this wasn't so good.
Yes.
And of course, hoping that they take that on board for the next
and
time.
Not necessarily
Exactly.
do so.
Exactly. But the whole idea of process writing is a fascinating area if people want to look into it more. I'm sure many people are already aware of it. But the idea is that there are pre-writing tasks, then we focus the ideas, have to evaluate and structure and edit, and the feedback is circular, that there's feedback coming in at different stages. So I have a couple of activities that I often do with my students. One of them is something which I've been doing for years. It's a little checklist that we look at before we do any task of writing.
Yes.
And we ask ourselves these questions. Who is going to read it? Okay.
Yes.
And the answer is not the teacher. The answer is the person who supposedly would read your text. Or maybe in real life they are going to read it. Of course, if you write an article and publish it in a school magazine.
You send an email. If you're applying for a job, you would have to send perhaps an email with the curriculum attachment, etc. Yeah, so you need to know
exactly
who your audience is.
So we're talking about who's the target reader, what register do we need to use, do we need it to be formal, informal? Again, appropriacy can be a bit of an issue there. It's not easy. What information do we want to include? The text type, which is it an article, is it a letter, is it a review, as Beatrice had asked her students to do.
Is it a blog entry, is it a Wikipedia post?
Yeah. And then editing.